Pastor Ben Hailey, welcome to the Thank God for Bitcoin podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jordan.
All right, man. So again, for those who aren't familiar with who you are and what you do, why don't you give a brief intro to all those folks out there?
Yes, Pastor Ben Hailey. I am an ordained pastor in the PCA, Presbyterian Church in America, and I'm currently serving as the senior pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church in College Station, a church plant that I've been going now for a little over 8 years.
Love it. And in terms of just kind of your walk with the Lord, basically when we have Christians on the podcast, we kind of ask them before we talk about their orange pill moment, we want to hear about their Jesus pill moment. So why don't you kind of share that with us? How did you come to know the Lord?
Yeah, thanks. So, my story grew up. My parents divorced when I was 4, and I kind of lived a pretty might say split life. Lived with my mother, but then had visitation with my dad every other weekend and that sort of thing. And when I was with mom, we went to church, and when I was with dad, if we were not at the farm, if we were at the farm, my grandmother took me to church. If we weren't, dad and I kind of hung out on Sunday mornings. And so lived with my mom, kind of became involved in the Baptist church that I was a part of, and got baptized when I was 8 or 9, but didn't really understand what was going on, and our life was pretty chaotic. My mom was into her second marriage that was pretty bad, and my dad's health was failing, and I'm an only child, and so some pretty tough years in there. And this actually will intersect some with my Bitcoin story, but my parents worked hard, but my dad was a high school basketball coach, so they don't make a lot of money, and my mom didn't have a college degree, and she was working hard. My grandparents had a big part in my life on my dad's side for sure, living at the farm. So I always had kind of what I needed, but in the middle of that, I was like, I gotta make a life. Like I'm on my own. Not to say people weren't loving me well, but it really was like I've got to carve out. And so I kind of plunged myself into academics, and went to a 2-year boarding school in Mississippi that was a math and science school. And kind of
what year was this? What year was this?
This would have been I graduated high school in '96.
Okay.
And then we didn't have a lot of money. My mother was going through her second divorce at the time. My dad had retired early because he had kidney failures, type 1 diabetic. And so my parents were like, we don't have any money. You can't take any loans. You can't work in college, but you got to go to college. So they'd been telling me that for a couple of years, which meant I got to find scholarships. And so I ended up going to Delta State University in Mississippi. It's a kind of a small state school because they paid for my college. And so went there and pledged a fraternity in college, and kind of was not really doing the church thing at all. But then it was January my freshman year when you have what's called Hell Week. That's just a code for initiation week. And one of the brothers in the fraternity was a Christian, and he's in when it's Hell Week, you have to do whatever the active say, right? You're a pledge of fraternity. You just have to do whatever they tell you to do. And so me and a good friend of mine, Bubba, that was his name. Bubba's a great guy. Me and Bubba were like really tight. We were both pre-med, pre-dental. And so this guy Brad, he was like, you and Bubba got to go to this Bible study with me. And we had to go. And so we went to this minister's house, and there was about 25, 30 students there. And he starts talking about the Bible. And I'm like, I have never heard anybody talk about the Bible like this. I mean, it was powerful. And so, we got initiated that week, and then we didn't have to do anything. But I was like, man, I got to go back to that Bible study. I ain't never heard anybody talk about the Bible like that.
Wow.
And so I kept going. And the minister, who's still a dear mentor in my life, he just took me under his wing. And then he was like, "Hey, we got this beach conference in May. You want to go with us?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah, I'll go to the beach, you know." And I was like, "I don't have any money." He's like, "We'll pay for it." I was like, "All right." So I went to this beach conference. Well, that Bible study was
Was this down in Florida? What beach were you at?
Yeah, Laguna Beach Christian Retreat Center.
Gotcha.
Which now in my ministry career, I think I've spent 23 weeks of my life at that place. But anyway, wow. So we went to this beach conference, and there was all these. They were pastors. You know, we had large group times, and then we had seminars. And I went to everything, and you know, I was more excited about the 3-on-3 basketball, you know, tournament there. But anyway, we got in the car to come back, and we were in a 15 passenger van, a bunch of students, and the minister put me in the front of the van. We had a 9-hour drive back, and I was like, Ricky, I didn't understand anything anybody said. Like, what is this? Like, what? And he just preached the gospel to me for like 9 hours. Then I went home for the summer. And because I was working on the farm and bagging groceries at a local grocery store. And anyway, I remember emailing him. This was in 97. I sent him an email, and I was like, what is grace? Like, what is that? To kind of tell you that I was so steeped in establishing the sense that I needed to establish myself in life, right? What is grace? And he sent me a couple of books. One little book called From Religion to Christ. It's a little commentary on Nicodemus' conversion. It was really good. It had powerful impact. So anyway, went back. I wasn't a Christian. Went back to school that fall. I'd been involved in cheating in class. And for the record, I've since confessed all that to the dean. And several years later, I went back. And anyway, so I was just not doing good. I mean, but I was still going to RUF, the Bible study. And the minister.
What is RUF?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. RUF is the National Campus Ministry Agency for the PCA. And it's pretty large nationwide ministry. Yep. So anyway, that was what that thing was. I didn't know what it was at the time. But I just knew this minister was loving me and praying for me. And anyway, so ironically, I was actually leading music because I could play the guitar, and he didn't have anybody, and he knew I wasn't a Christian, but he didn't care. He's like, he just he needed somebody, and he wanted me as close as possible, which I just really love. But anyway, so fast forward, sophomore year, fall, I'm just under what I now know is under the conviction of the Holy Spirit. Right. And I came home for Christmas break, and I grabbed my climbing tree stand, and I went to the woods to deer camp, and I climbed a pine tree every day in my climbing stand, but I took a Bible with me. And I started reading the Psalms, and I got to Psalm 32. You know, bless the man whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. And then on into that Psalm, like my strength was sapped, was in the heat of summer. And I was like, Lord, I feel this. What is going on? I need you. And I became a Christian. And that's kind of, and then I came back, and I was presented with the same opportunity to engage in some sin patterns. And I just said no. And I called my minister, and I was like, I said no. He's like, boy, I think you've become a Christian. And so that's my, and then so got involved in RUF, and I'm still pre-med in college. And, but simultaneously joined a church, got involved in the church, started helping with youth group, started discerning a call to ministry over about a 2-year period, married Beth. And then when she finished college, we actually moved to Jackson. I went to Reformed Seminary in Jackson.
Yep.
Did RUF for 4 years at Hines Community College, and 9 years of RUF at Texas A&M, and now in my 9th year planting at Redeemer. So there you go. 2 kids. Hannah's 21. She's a junior at A&M. Nathan's a freshman at Mississippi State.
Yep.
There you go.
That's wild. And so
yes.
Tell me as much as you want to tell me about how you met Beth and what that looked like.
Yeah. So Beth showed up a year after me. This is a funny story too. She showed up at Delta State. She was a year behind me. This was fall of my sophomore year. And like I said, I was leading music at RUF, but like I was still living in sin.
Yeah.
And she showed up, and I'm like, that is the most amazing girl I've ever seen in my entire life.
Mm.
And I remember sitting in the cafeteria with my minister. He's like, boy, that girl's a Christian, you know?
That girl got the ghost.
That girl's a Christian. And so he said, you need to focus on relationship with the Lord and what he's doing in your life. And I did. And, I got on my knees and I begged Jesus to save me in those moments. But anyway, about 5 minutes after I became a Christian, I asked Beth out. So, yeah, we met at RUF and we got married pretty young. I was 21, she was 20. So middle of her junior year. So
yep. That's great.
Yeah.
Love
And
it.
she still is the most amazing woman I've ever met in my life, for the
Yep.
record. So
Again, I won't confirm that because I'm also married, but I can confirm she's an awesome lady.
She's
we
awesome.
hung out. She's a winner.
Yes.
Okay, so Ben, so then now tell us your Bitcoin story. So you were a minister. When did you become a minister?
2004, I was ordained. I had done 3 years of youth ministry from 01 to 04, but officially ordained in June of 2004.
Okay, so
yeah.
you're ministering
Yeah.
in Mississippi and other places?
In Mississippi till I was 30. We moved here in 08 for me to do RUF at Texas A&M. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. And so now kind of you can go whatever path you want to. Tell us your orange pill story. What did that look like?
So the stories kind of intersect, right? So in the sense that the scarcity of being a child of divorced parents, my mother grew up below the poverty line. And again, my family were all basketball coaches. And so we weren't just like loaded or anything. But anyway, so one of the things that, being a child of divorced parents, kind of lower income, money is always an issue. It's just an issue. And so you have, when you're a kid, you're like, Mom, can I go do this? We need to ask your dad, and so I had to kind of manage that. For the record, I love my parents. My dad passed away in 2002 from complication of diabetes. My mother's an amazing woman, and she and I have talked at length about all those days and those hard days that she had, that we had together, et cetera. But anyway, just kind of that constant back and forth of like, I want to go to Philmont. I need somebody to pay. Can somebody help me pay for that? I was in the Boy Scouts. I want to go to Philmont. I want to go on the second trip. And it's like, we don't have any money, da 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 da. And it was just back and forth. And then, another story I had kind of taking note here is when my dad, I spent every other weekend with him, but then on my off weeks, he'd come take me out to eat. He lived about 30 minutes away. And I just remember getting in the car with him one time and he was just like, I don't have enough money for us to go get us something to eat. And I wasn't mad or anything, but my point there is when you're a child, you make these subconscious childhood vows. And it's very important, I think, for a person to go back and kind of think about these subconscious childhood vows that you make. And one of those vows that I now look back and realize I made was, I will never need anything from anybody in my life. I will make sure, especially financially, that I will not go without. And so you kind of fast forward, and that means that I plunge myself into academics. I'm like, I gotta get ahead. I've got to find a really high paying job. I do not want to worry about money. And so that's kind of tracking in me. And I became a Christian. And of course, the Lord begins to work in my heart in a lot of ways. I will say on the flip side of that story, my family is very generous, even with what little they had. So, and one of the things my mother had me do when I was little, I can't even remember, is, the marshmallow cream jars, the glass ones that you would make Rice Krispie treats out of. So she cleaned those out. She cleaned 2 of them out, and she screwed the lid back on the top, and they're empty. And she cut a hole in the top of each, and she labeled one tithe and the other one life savings. And she said, no matter what, this is what we do. And it was just boom right there. Wow. And so that's one of her legacies that I really, really appreciate. But anyway, the other side is like, my grandmother was always slipping me money
Mm.
you know, and the culture, the old Southern culture of we're going to help out family was very much present in my family system that I very much appreciate. So kind of got those two parallel things going. So anyway, my dad was actually a high school economics teacher while he was a basketball coach, and he was always preaching about economics. I didn't know what economics was, but now that I'm in this Bitcoin journey, I remember all these things he used to say. So anyway, one of the things he started preaching to me early is like, you got to get a Roth IRA. You got to do a Roth IRA. Like they came out, I don't know when they came out, early 90s, mid 90s, something. He's like, this is what you got to do. And so I just listened to him. So I had a little extra money left over from my scholarship. So I started a Roth IRA when I was 20 years old.
Wow.
Anyway, then my dad passed away, and the little money that he left us, I stuck in Roth IRAs.
Dumped it in, yeah.
So, you know, fast forward to last year, 2024, January 2024. You know, I'm looking at my returns, and I had set it up as like fairly aggressive, like, you know, and this is also part of my Bitcoin mindset. It's like, man, I got riches coming in heaven. You know, let's go with what we think might be a good idea. Let's not live in, you know, my counselor says I'm a thrill seeker. Anyway, but I have my own versions of that, like church planting and Bitcoin. But anyway, so anyway, fast forward, you know, I'm looking at my returns. Well, it'd been like 20 years since I'd put a little money in the Roth, and I hadn't been good about contributing all the time to it, on and off, you know. And I was like 8% return in 20 years. I'm like,
yikes.
Everybody told me that was the right thing. We were hardcore Dave Ramsey when we first got married. Like we were the envelope system.
Yeah.
And I will say over the years, that childhood vow, you know, of we will never have a need for money, wasn't always good. It really wasn't. I mean, like my wife calling me one time. We had 2 little babies, and I was maybe 30 minutes away from her at a conference room. She called me, and she's like, and I'd always told her, I was like, hey, when there's a thunderstorm nearby, we got to cut the air conditioning off because we can't afford to replace it. And she called me, and she's like, honey, we're dying from heat. Can I please turn the air on? And one of my friends looked at me, and he was like, I mean, he lit into me, and I was like, he's right. Like, so there was these negative expressions of this childhood vow that cost my family that I am ashamed of. So anyway, so I'm looking at my Roth IRA returns. I'm looking at some of my other retirement returns, and I'm like, at the same time, Beth grew up with Joel Bumgar in youth group.
Way.
Yes.
Joel.
They were in youth group together.
Get out of here.
And Joel's been very successful. He's a hard worker. He built a business for 10 years, from the decade of 00 to 10. It was the only company in Mississippi that grew 100% per year for 10 straight years.
Oh my God.
So he's extremely brilliant. Well, he sold his company, and he's public about this. He gave a ton of that money away. He just gave it away.
Yeah.
And then he ran for office. He was 8 years Mississippi state of Mississippi representative. And then he discovered Bitcoin. Well, Joel is just, when the ETFs got approved in January, he just starts posting on Facebook every single day about this thing. And I'm just like, what is this thing that he keeps talking about? It's wearing me out, you know? And I was like, the problem is Joel's conviction unnerved me a little bit, because I was like, here's a guy I trust a lot. Here's a guy who's 100% dedicated first and foremost to Jesus. And here's a guy that's technically very savvy. I mean, he built computers down to the circuits. I mean, and so he's talking about this thing, and all of a sudden, so I'm looking at my returns on my Roth, and he's talking about this Bitcoin thing, and I'm like, I need to look at this. So for about 6 weeks, I just read everything he had. I watched all of his videos. I watched all the videos he recommended. This was in about March of last year. And this is what happened. Within a week of me, like it clicking for me and it going, I can't unsee
Yep.
the history of money,
Yep.
the history of fiat currency. What is the nature of money? How is fiat, debasement, inflation, everything that I've been reading? I was like, I can't unsee all of that. At the same time, my wife gets diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. Right in the middle of that. And so we're in the middle of this orange pilling moment. Beth gets diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And we kind of have a discussion. She's like, I was like, baby, we're about to go all in on Bitcoin. And she's like, we had a Zoom with Joel, Beth, and I together. Yeah. We did that. I said, hey, let's sit down together. He spent over an hour with us, just kind of talking through all the different concerns there. And so what happened was Beth was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. I needed a healthy way to deal with that. And so I began to study Bitcoin on my off time at night, in the evenings, hundreds of hours studying, reading, listening to podcasts, connecting with guys like you and Tim Fox and Jim at Magnalia. And so I just plunged in as far as like, what is this, understanding this? And that happened kind of throughout the summer. And then in October of 24, somewhere in there, September or October, BlackRock comes out with their paper essentially promoting, or I might say like recommending, that all portfolios have some percentage of allocation towards Bitcoin. And I kind of went, that is big. And then it hit me like, wait a minute. We should study this. The institution of the church, we should study this.
Yep.
This is something that I have a personal conviction about, but now we have the largest asset manager in the world producing a paper that says, you might want to look into this.
Yeah.
So I literally cooked up that overture, and I'll explain, if you'd like me to, I can explain kind of an overture.
Yeah, exactly. Explain what that is for folks.
So in the PCA, we have a book of church order, for example. And if you would like to see changes made to that book of church order, or you would like the denomination to study a specific subject that's related to the health of the church, for example, or some sort of theological, doctrinal aberrations that are floating out there in society that we would like to study and address, the way you do that is you write what's called an overture, and you say, I would like the General Assembly to consider making this change in the book of church order. For example, we make little tweaks to the BCO often because we have a judicial case and we realize we got a gap or we got a loophole somewhere. We need to kind of close that in and stuff like that. Okay.
Just real quick, back up a little bit and kind of describe what kind of stuff is in the book of church order. Is it, is it like theological stuff? Is it like cases of stuff that's happened?
Yes.
Like, what is it?
Yeah. So, there's our system of government. So it's like how you ordain pastors, what are sessions, what is session meeting, how often should you have session as elders, how do you and then you got like discipline cases, how do you handle a pastor who's committed a sin or is in theological error, or how does a congregate file a complaint against the action of a session. And then you have directory of public worship, part 3. Some of it is binding with the sacraments. Some of it's just beautiful language on what worship looks like. And so that's the bulk of our book of church order. And it's a thing that we take vows to. We basically say, hey, we're going to work this way. And if we want to change things, we can bring these overtures through a presbytery. So I wrote this overture in December, and I sent it to my presbytery. And the overture was to encourage churches, presbyteries, and our denominational agencies to study the wisdom of including Bitcoin in their respective balance sheets. That was the overture. And then you have all of these whereases, which is kind of your rationale for why you think that's a good idea. You might quote the BCO, you might quote the Westminster Confession, you quote the Bible, you might quote current research. And so it's kind of a one sheet executive summary of the subject matter that you would like for our denomination to consider. So it comes to our presbytery, and it actually passed our presbytery in January of 25, which means it will automatically go to the overtures committee at General Assembly that meets 2 days before the General Assembly. So you have all of these overtures that come from all of these different presbyteries that could be dealing with different changes, proposed changes to our book of church order, could be dealing with, again, these theological, doctrinal studies that you would like to see done, things like that. They all come together, Overtures Committee, 2 days before General Assembly. And General Assembly is the kind of the national meeting of our denomination. Coincidentally, or you might say providentially, I actually happen to be the Overtures representative for our presbytery this year. I had actually been elected in 24, but when my wife got diagnosed with cancer, I didn't go to the General Assembly, so they delayed my appointment for a year. Anyway, so and you can jump in and interrupt questions.
What I was just going to say is give us like 2 or 3 examples of other overtures that maybe have been implemented into the BCO, or maybe that haven't, or just what are some issues that in the past few years that have gotten their own overture?
Man, it's really, it could be micro or it could be macro. Yeah. It can be micro on, hey, we did a study and we actually think 2/3 of people need to be present instead of 3/4 on this particular kind of vote. It could be, clarifying, like what we did one a couple of years ago to kind of cement the chaplain status, our military chaplain status, and that gave them a better freedom and a better kind of how do I say it, a status with the military, because we as their denomination endorsed, hey, this is their status, and so they needed that. And for us, so it's all those kinds of, that's a macro thing. You got a micro thing, and so you got all those kind of, we had 40 overtures this year.
Yeah.
But what happens at overtures is, they all come together, and then we end up probably consolidating 10 down to 1 because they're the same subject. Yeah.
The thing I would point out, because I'm sure we have people who are from different denominational backgrounds.
Yeah.
So there's people who I'm sure who are listening to this who are thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, do you really need all that? And I think the thing that I have come to just appreciate, again, different denominations emphasize different aspects of the character of God. And one of the things that Presbyterians do really well is just the order of God. Like God, there's an order and intentionality. And so a desire for there to be careful thought for everything that we do in representing God as the church and as his shepherds. If you're a pastor, there's a lot of care that goes into, and a lot of thought that goes into making sure that we're able to love our neighbor. We're able to take this broad thing that everyone would agree with, love God and love your neighbor, and then flesh that out in ways that are biblically informed and that are historically informed, and a lot of things like that. So there can also, obviously, there's no system, whether it's a congregational system or a Presbyterian system or a, whatever kind of system, no system in and of itself is this, can ensure that stuff can't go wrong, or that there won't be abuses, or that there, like that doesn't happen. But this is one system that has the trade-offs that come with it has been effective. And so
I totally agree. I mean, It's one of the reasons why I'm Presbyterian. Is you're not in reaction mode. You're in prayerful, thoughtful response mode with the collective wisdom of other churches and presbyteries. There's a real connection there.
Yep.
And it's interesting. We get criticized because we kind of slow acting, but like, there's business literature that says if you want overnight change in a business, that's a 10-year process.
Yep.
I mean, the research is true. And so I'm like, well, if it takes us 12 to 18 months to go from A to B,
yep.
but A, we get there together.
Yep.
And B, we get there thoughtfully and prayerfully with wisdom. I'll do that. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So
one of the things that comes to mind on that front, again, for the biblicists, because one of the concern, I grew up in circles where, a lot of there would be criticism of, extra biblical things being put onto, put in practice by churches. And so somebody there, you could definitely have people who are like, oh, Book of Common Order, that wasn't inspired by scripture. Whatever, they could see this as being something that's problematic. But I think that there's tons of scriptures that talk about the need for order and the wisdom that's found in abundance of counselors, the wisdom of not being hasty and not making decisions quickly. And one of the things that the scriptures talk about is that
being sober-minded.
Being sober-minded. So
right.
What that requires is getting some distance from events. You don't want to be making big decisions right after something emotional has happened. And I think one of the other things that God talks about and that's reflected in his character is that he's slow to anger. And so one of the things that is easy, and we're talking about this 2 days removed from Charlie Kirk being killed, 3 or 4 days removed from the Ukrainian refugee lady being killed. One of the things that it's easy to do is to be swift to anger. And then the part of the problem when the weakness of being swift to anger, fast to get angry, is that it can go as easy as it comes. And so your response it's easy to forget about it just as easy as it comes. And so if you're grounding your anger in eternal things that God calls sin and things that God says that are going to cause problems, that we have this recorded for generations, we have these things recorded and written down, then our anger has more of a grounding to endure and to not just be forgotten. And so I think that this is something, again, even though it can be frustrating, and we can get to an example of some of the frustrating consequences of when things don't go the way that they're supposed to go, or the way that maybe we wanted them to go. Overall, this idea of being slow to anger, but then once you get angry, once you figure out what's going on, then you have this burning heart that has this propulsive power to stay there and to be immovable in trying to do what's right. And so, again, I would just encourage people who think that this is overkill and that kind of stuff. I would encourage them to be slower to dismiss something that seems different.
Yeah, I mean, all I have to do is look at my own heart, and 90% of the time, I don't have a great reaction.
Yep.
But I'm called to a holy passion that is sober-minded. So, what you're calling anger, I might call holy passion, whatever. I mean, if I've got a long-standing holy passion to see, the curse reversed, that's a beautiful thing. I'm entrenched in that, and I'm gonna work that methodically. Evil's entrenched, but so am I. So are we, and so is God. I'm going to do my best to work in the process. Are there moments where a quick response is needed? Of course. I'm a volunteer chaplain with College Station Police Department, and I get a call at 2 a.m. we've got to make a death notification on a bad situation, or we've got a suicide. And it, like, there needs to be a quick kind of crisis response moment to end those kind of things. But your day in and day out life is trying to weave in these holy good passions. Right. So.
Yeah, one of the things, again, we haven't hung out a ton, right? We've hung out a number of times, and we've had a bunch more calls. And I mean, I just have been so encouraged by you. Like getting to hang out with you at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas was the highlight. I've said this to multiple people. Like, it was the highlight for me, because one of the things that comes across, within the Bitcoin world, especially for most of the early adopters, a lot of them were very technical people. Like, they're very hyper technical. They are programmers, they're philosophers, and like all this kind of stuff. They were super. You had to be super nerdy in order to be able to understand and operate and deal with the really difficult to manage wallet systems and all kinds of stuff early on. And then as time goes on, you get more and more people who come from different backgrounds, who aren't necessarily the technical people, but who basically approach Bitcoin from a different, motivated by a different thing and drawn to a different aspect of Bitcoin. And so when I mean, just your passion for people and your passion for the Lord and your desire to see, basically God's resources be stewarded in ways that are going to allow, orders of magnitude more people to hear the gospel, for orders of magnitude more ministers to continue to be able to work and not have to shut down their churches or not have to seek out second or third jobs. I just have seen that in you, and you're incredibly eloquent. Plus, you also have your secret weapon of that awesome Mississippi accent. I just find myself like, man, it would be so much easier to convince certain people if I had that accent. Daggone it. But at the same time, I just want you to know, I just really appreciate you. And I really think that it's a timely thing, right? I think the two of us, I'm a similar heart and mindset. I don't have the programming skills. I tried to use ChatGPT to program a website, and it was atrocious. It was bad. But I do have, the pastor's heart, and I see and prioritize these same things that you do. And I really think I just have been super encouraged to have you, another laborer in the that's the bullpen. What's during a war in the trenches? That's
trenches, yes.
To have another similarly minded brother in the trenches, it's just been a great encouragement to me. So kind of, why don't you talk through, Ben, for us? I mean, you put forward this overture. How did it go?
Yeah. Let me just say, I was under no illusion that this overture was going to pass. Just be very clear about that. I was not like, I knew it had no chance, but honestly, my goal was to get it passed at Presbytery, because once it did in January, it went national.
Yep.
Didn't matter. It was immediately posted to the stated clerk's website as an overture that would be considered General Assembly. That's a win. Yep. That's it.
Yep.
And then that gave us the opportunity for the foundation I'm also working with, Jim and Tim with Magnalia, to say, hey, let's get a booth. Let's try to get a booth. This thing's going to die. It's okay. But is it going to create conversation?
Yep.
I think it might. I'm not sure, but I think it might.
Yep.
So we get to overture. We get to General Assembly. This is mid-June, and I'm on overtures committee. And the way they arrange the overtures is, most important to least important, or most urgent to least urgent. Yeah. So most urgent are kind of your rules of assembly operation changes that need to happen at that assembly. Then you have kind of your prioritized book of church order changes based on the number of presbyteries that are wanting to speak into that particular thing. And then the study committees kind of come last. So I knew that, and that was fine. And so we were at the ninth hour on Tuesday after 2 long days of going through 40 overtures. And so I get my opportunity to speak, and I had written my speech, and I had a lot of really wise people help me craft that speech. Some guys from traditional finance, actually, who have become Bitcoiners, are like, hey, you want to talk in these ways. And so I just did whatever they told me to do, and had kind of my own flavor to it. Gave my speech, got voted. I think it was like 106 to 15 in overtures. And I was like, my first thought was, where are these 15 rascals at? That haven't like, no, this is the other thing, Jordan, leading up to GA, I felt lonely. I mean, I was like, I got no calls from anybody. I might've got a text from somebody saying, hey, I'm a Bitcoin or two in the PCA and I want to know, I'm supporting this. I might've got a couple of those, but I was like, is anybody around here? Am I that? I mean, I know I'm a little crazy, but like, and so these guys come up to me like, yeah, I'm a Bitcoiner. I bet. I'm like, where have you been?
Cowards, talk.
I'm just like, and no, I mean, because I will say, man, I knew that I was throwing 21 years of ordained ministry in the PCA and trust and friendships and networks that I'd built on the line, because this would be out of nowhere for tons of groups of my friends. Like, what are you thinking, Hailey? And I knew that, and I was just like, I don't care. It's this thing. I really do believe in this thing. I studied it for hundreds of hours, and I've surrounded myself with people who understand it better than me, that I trust. And so that was fun though. Those guys came up to me and they're like, and I'm like, are you coming to our meetups or whatever? And they're like, oh yeah, we signed up. I'm like, what? And so then GA, we got a couple days there at the table before it comes up onto the main floor. But anyway, our table was nonstop. Yeah. I mean, people coming by like crazy. And so anyway, we get to the floor and there was a technical snafu where Tim didn't get to speak to it. For the record, I already have an overture to modify the rules of assembly operations to give preferential treatment to the man who pulls the overture out of omnibus. We can talk about that later. I'm just saying, it's coming, everybody. It's coming. I'm coming with another overture just on that technical piece, because I'm like, anyway,
describe. We'll get into there. Like, what exactly happened?
What happened was when the overture's chairman brings his report to the General Assembly, which is, let's say, 2,200 teaching elders and ruling elders in the big hall. Sure. When he brings his report, one of the things he does first is he said, these 20 overtures were either overwhelmingly recommended that General Assembly answer in the positive, or these overtures were overwhelmingly recommended to be answered in the negative. Mm-hmm. And what he does is he puts all those in what's called an omnibus, which means you take one vote on those 20 overtures. Sure. But any one delegate can stand up and say, I would like to pull out overture 11, which was the number of our overture. So Tim stood up. Tim's a fellow teaching elder in the PCA. He was a registered delegate. He stood up and he said, I would like for overture 11 to be pulled out. And then somebody says overture 18 or whatever. And those have to be considered. Like, in other words, if one brother wants the General Assembly to consider it, we have to consider it. So what happened was we come back, we deal with like the big dog overtures that were kind of, spicy, we deal with some of those. We're 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours into that process. Everybody's exhausted. It's 4:00 on Thursday. Yeah. And we come back to the overtures that have been pulled out of omnibus to be considered. We come back to overture 11, and a brother stands up at a mic and he says,
Tim is at another mic. He's like,
Tim is at a mic. Tim is at a mic.
How many mics do they have? There's like 5 or 6?
About 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
And six mics. So brother standing up there at front at mic 2, Tim's back here at like mic 4 on the floor. And the moderator recognizes mic 2 first. And that brother rises to call the question, which means immediately go to a vote, no debate, no discussion. And I'll be honest, I was shocked. I had never seen that happen in General Assembly in my 20 years. I'd never seen someone rise to call the question on an overture that had been previously in good faith pulled out by a brother, right, to be considered. And because I think 2 reasons: because the Assembly doesn't understand Bitcoin, and because they were dog tired. Yeah. They overwhelmingly voted to call the question, and therefore Tim did not get to speak.
Yeah.
So I have an overture coming this year to modify the rules of assembly operations so that if a brother pulls an overture out of omnibus, he will get preferential treatment to speak to that item. I hope it passes. I've talked to a lot of my big dog friends in the PCA, and they're like, "You got to write it. You got to do it." I was like, "It's coming." So there you go.
So okay, so now again, the Lord is sovereign.
We're getting in the weeds. I know we're getting in the weeds.
No, this is great. Yeah. Weeds are great. This is a podcast.
Yeah.
Weeds are great.
Great.
But okay, so now again, we're Christians. We give grace.
Yeah.
Whose fault was this? Was this Kevin DeYoung? Who technically in the moment? Whose fault was it?
This is the issue. There's no fault because technically the moderator, it's whoever he recognizes as the mic first. So, and I'm just saying we can fix that loophole, and I want to fix that for future overtures that have anything to do with anything. Like no. We pulled it out with the assumption that the brother was going to get to speak to it. So we got to fix that. Yep.
So you're saying it just was there was a couple mics that Kevin DeYoung could have recognized.
That's right.
And so he just happened to pick this guy.
That's right.
It wasn't like
I don't read motive into that at all.
Yeah.
But it did actually happen twice. And then another brother stood up and said exactly what I just said, which was like, brothers, the spirit here is that if a brother pulls out an overture, he should be able to speak to it. And I'm like, well, we're just going to close that technical loophole so there's no question on it. So
okay. So now at this point, so it got voted down. Is this something where, again, for those of us who aren't as familiar with the overture policies, is this something where you can reintroduce it, or is it like once it's down, it's gone forever?
Of course, man. We can. Okay. Let me put the word out. We can have 10 overtures, Bitcoin overtures this year. Go for it. And I'm on overtures, and I can tell you, I will speak to it if you would like to. So I will, I'll be glad to. So you can bring stuff up. So we're prayerfully considering now what that looks like for the coming year. Yeah.
Okay. So now talk me through a little bit about, so you obviously you had a bunch of the secret guys come up and, slide into the booth and be like, I'm a Bitcoiner. They're whispering,
right.
And you're reading them Revelation 21:8, where it talks about cowards and all the kinds of stuff. So
no, that's
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. So you have those kind of responses. Those are positive, encouraging ones. You also have, again, the broader 85 plus people who just leaders who just voted down. So obviously there's a wide amount of responses. This is nothing new. We've, all of us who are Bitcoiners, we've tried to talk to people in our lives about Bitcoin. Are there specific underlying beliefs that you think are driving the responses of pastors in the PCA?
Yeah. So
or are they kind of, would you say it's kind of just the same reasons as everybody else?
So I really want to be careful not to describe motive.
Sure.
At the same time, I'm happy to describe some of the responses. So first of all, for the guys who came out of the woodworks who were like Bitcoiners, first thing was like, well, let's get organized. Let's get together. Let's talk through. And we've been doing that, and that's been wonderful. Such a wide array of responses, and many of the sponsors was like, is that still a thing? Like Bitcoin, is it still a thing? And I'm like, it is, and I would love to tell you more. That would have been my response 2 years ago. I mean, so I totally understand that response. I mean, we're all doing what we believe the Lord's calling us to do, proclaiming the gospel. I mean, do you want to learn more about it? And I've had, and some are like, well, yeah, what can you send me? I'm like, well, let's get that conversation started. And then there were some responses that were definitely informed by a broader narrative, like that's just for money laundering, which, for the record, you can Google, Grok, chat, whatever you want. Cash is still king on money laundering.
Yeah.
I recently read a stat that a criminal is 100 times more likely to use cash than Bitcoin for illicit activity. So that's just a narrative thing. So they're like this, and then I just kind of, with humility, kind of go, That's not true.
Yeah.
Here's some research on that. And then, some of the responses are there's a genuine curiosity. I actually wrote some of these down. I think some are deflated responses. And here's what I mean by that. They actually might understand it, might know it, and there's some shame there that they don't have any money to even look into it. And some of that shame is illegitimate shame, meaning they have genuinely sought to be faithful with what they have and love their families, and God has called them to different places. And anytime you move, and pastors move, there's a great cost to moving. They just don't have any extra cash at all, and eyeballs in debt. And that's hard. And that's really hard. And I don't, this is why I don't like the phrase, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. I'm just like, we need to edit that out. We get all is gift. All is gift. All news is gift. Hard news, good news, it's all gift. So we need to parse that out. And then there's some legitimate shame of like, I've not managed my money well. I'm terrible at money. And I, this gets into like their stories of growing up and their stories of what money is and what it represents. This really gets into high time preference, low time preference mentality that Bitcoiners talk about, and, theoretically Christians should be the lowest time preference people ever, because we know we have the fullness of the riches of Christ now, and we have the, you might say, material riches of heaven to come, the inheritance of life eternal with Jesus, and so
we have access to go and like make our requests known, and like he's got all of heaven's resources to help us when we need it.
So the low time preference in terms of eschatology, I think, does a couple of things. One, it lets you kind of settle down. Like, I don't have to gratify. I mean, I'm all for fun. I love having fun, but I don't have to just spend all my money every day all the time. I'm fine, so, but then I think there was some contempt responses, and I know that sounds like I'm reading motives, because I am. Part of it is because there's actually facial signs that research has said that point to person has a contempt for you, like a cocking of like, what are you talking about? That's a research based telltale. So I got some of those responses, and it's interesting. And I'm going to kind of go off on a little tangent here and pull it back. I promise.
I love it.
So this past Sunday morning, my wife's getting ready to teach 3rd and 4th grade Sunday school, and she's teaching Mark chapter 1. And she's like, hey, I've taught this before, but do you have any like just little, is there a way I can like illustrate this or kind of make this more of a tangible hands-on activity, talk about Mark 1? And I had an illustration that we all know, like, the beginning of the gospel, the good news, the beginning of the gospel is the Son of God. Okay, so we know gospel means good news, right? We know that's literally what it means. And so I just said, hey, it's like headlines on a newspaper, like Mark saying, these are the headlines. This is the good news on the newspaper. And one of the things I thought was, and she was like, oh, so she starts sketching out a newspaper, and then she starts putting that on there. And I'm like, yeah, show them that like, this is the headlines. Well, the gospel is the most disruptive news to ever hit the planet. Disruptive, particularly to the idea of salvation by works of the law. Or you might say a pseudo salvation by works of the law, and a pseudo salvation through gratification of the flesh. I mean, it confronts those two most prominent default human instincts as a result of the fall. I need to make sure that I'm a good person, and I want to live according to all of my fleshly desires. And those are definitely in conflict, but the gospel is the good news that disrupts those two paradigms greatly. So I started thinking about this, and I thought Bitcoin is the great disruption in the financial world. It is the great disruption. It is the disruption to a Keynesian economic fiat system. It is a disruption to, a lavish lifestyle. It brings in really different ideas about what money is. And so some of the reactions that I have received, you might say, if the gospel is the biggest news to hit the salvation by works establishment and the pseudo salvation by gratification of the flesh, this is like, you got Rome and Pharisees, right?
Yep.
You got the Hellenists and you got the Pharisees. Those are your two parties, right? They're coming from different places. If the gospel is a great disruption for that, I think in our circles, Bitcoin is a great disruption to the current financial establishment. And the reactions can point to an entrenchment in that financial establishment. Again, I will be very careful, because the men that I know that are working hard to ensure that we as pastors have, good retirement, working hard, the deacons and the elders in our churches are working hard to be faithful stewards of what we are.
Yep.
I have encountered boomer ruling elders who are genuinely curious about this and have actually gone in on significant allocations of Bitcoin. And I thought, what is the difference between this person and that person? One is engaging this new idea, this new innovation with humility. And one is just holding contempt for it.
Yep.
And it makes me think, okay, I think we're actually, because of the gospel, hardwired to welcome disruptive, what we believe to be good news. So, for example, somebody grew up in a community and then it's like, Johnny became a Christian.
Yeah.
And the response is either celebration or the response is speculation.
Exactly. Yep.
And I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. I understand you'll know a tree by its fruit and those sorts of things. Yep. I got that. But it's the same reaction my dad's friends had when I said I was going to be a pastor. My dad's friends were like, Mike Hailey's son is going to be a preacher. Are you kidding me? And even like years later, I don't know what it is. Years later, one of my friends was like, where did you come from? And I'm like, I mean, the grace of God. So,
Heaven.
So it seems like I've just, to my fellow Christian brothers and sisters, a posture of humility, and particularly in this area. If you study Bitcoin and you arrive at the conviction that it's not a good system, or that's fine.
Yeah.
Don't stifle the process of learning about it. So that's kind of that's kind of the end of my notes.
Yeah, that's great. No, I really appreciate that. And again, I feel like you've tried to be appropriately winsome, appropriately careful. I think one of the conclusions that I've come to about some of this stuff and some of the dynamics you're talking about is, without it all comparing the relative importance of these two things that I'm getting ready to compare. Okay, that's not why That's not how a comparison works. Okay. I'm not drawing a comparison between the importance. I'm drawing a comparison between the mechanics of these two things.
Yes, exactly.
So the hardest people to talk to about Christ are not the atheists who've never heard, or like the people who are in the jungle tribe who've never heard about Jesus. Like they're just not. They're not the hardest people to talk to. The hardest people to talk to are the people who've already either like they've grown up Christian and then walked away. It's the people who have some knowledge or think they have an understanding of the gospel and of what it is and what it means and the consequences of it, but who actually don't have a proper understanding of it, or who are actually like, and so it's very similar with Bitcoin. People, they think they know what it is. They've heard about it, but they don't stop to question. This would be another encouragement that I have, is they don't stop to question the source of where they heard about Bitcoin from.
Man, you just made me realize that. So doing campus ministry at Texas A&M for 9 years.
Yep.
You just made me realize how I was actually shaped and formed into helping people detangle their Jesus stories.
Yep.
So that I can slide across the table what I believe to be the true gospel story.
Yep.
And I had to do that. I mean, I had a friend who went to Texas A&M, who went into campus ministry. And I told him one time, I was like, dude, it's hard actually talking to these kids who have these different experiences that are not in accord with the scriptures. He's like, I could never do campus ministry at Texas A&M because there's so many stories that you have to help kind of sort in order to get to. And now that you're saying what you're just saying, I'm like, that's the same thing with the current financial system, right? You're shaped and formed in such a way, and then you got to wait a minute. Can anybody listening right now can they define what is money? Because 2 years ago, I could not have.
100%.
Right. Exactly, and I'm like, wow, I need to think about that. Like I use it every day. What is it? You know, so stuff like that.
And that's kind of, again, the conclusion I've come to in 6 years of being in Bitcoin is the hardest thing is coming to the realization that you don't understand something. And you can have incredible proximity to something and still not understand it at all. And so there's a lot of people who think they understand money because they use it every day. And it's the same, very similar principle of there's people who grew up in church. And so they think that they just assume that they understand it because they had proximity to the institution or something. I think the other thing that should help people, right? This is a talking point that I've had with people is, again, questioning the source of where you learned about Bitcoin from. Because for the vast majority of people, their first touch or their first 5 touches or 10 touches of thinking about Bitcoin is they heard about it from CNBC or Fox Business or whatever. They're hearing about it from people who are primarily framing Bitcoin from the standpoint of a speculative investment. And all of the stuff that's being discussed is about Bitcoin's dollar-denominated price and about which companies are owning it and about, it's all focused on one aspect of what Bitcoin is without at all getting into, well, again, the questions of why was Bitcoin created? What is money? Like some of these more foundational questions that we haven't had to think about, that the vast majority of us haven't had to think about for generations. And so, and again, the people who do, God bless them, the gold people, a lot of what they're saying is so true. It's totally right. But because of how gold has been marginalized by this system and just kind of shoved to the side and mocked by people who, unfortunately, who have an economic interest in shoving it in the corner. A lot of these financial advisors from, fiat world financial advisors, they have incentives to do so. People just aren't. They're not in a place where they can even think about some of these things from first principles. And so the other point that I would make with that is we are in a point of history, and I would argue more than ever in the history of the world, we are more disconnected from reality than the world has ever been. And the reason I think I can say that is because there's never been a fiat world reserve currency. That's never
Hmm.
happened. There's never been a time. We've always had, there's like fiat currencies go back hundred thousands of years. Like they go back a long time, but we've never had a reserve currency be a fiat currency.
Right.
And what fiat currencies do is they give whoever is at the helm, they give them the ability to subsidize and create their own reality. And so we've been able to, we've seen effectively endless wars being fought for the last 50 years. We've effectively seen, I mean, just all kinds of things that people that are going against the free market desires of the vast majority of market participants. So the United States is sending hundreds of millions of dollars to Africa to fund family planning, which is really abortions. Now, how are they able to fund that? Is that because abortion is such an important tenet to everyday Americans that they want to sacrifice their hard-fought, you know, wealth to No, they're not at all. That's not at all why that's happening. That's able to happen because they're literally printing money out of thin air and sending it all over the world because they're subsidizing other interests and other political interests and all these kind of things. And so, like we should be able to, and especially Christians should be looking at this and be willing to consider, man, we're living in a day and age when a meaningful percentage of people are approving of trans surgeries and approving of all kinds of insane things that all of us are like that 5 minutes ago everyone knew were insane. And so is it really that much more of a stretch to consider that maybe we're not in the best position to figure out if, to basically, we're not in the best position to say, hey, we authoritatively understand money and Bitcoin to be able to condemn it. Like that would be the that would
Yeah.
be the concern that I would have for a lot of people who again are very smart, who see the downstream consequences in reality of sin and how entrenched it gets and the consequences of it. They haven't been in a position to have that conversation and to think about money through that lens.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, there's just a couple of notes on that. I mean, one of the things that when you think about fiat currency dollar, government's involvement in the financial realm, et cetera, you start to really think about agency as a
yep,
human being and how you
yep,
were made. And you kind of realize, wait a minute, I do get to ask questions,
yep,
and I do get to have thoughts, and I do get to, and then all of a sudden there's this sense of adventure,
yep,
this curiosity,
yep,
this realization that safety is a myth,
correct.
right? And you do feel more free, first and foremost in the gospel. This is why I do think we see a ton of Christians in the Bitcoin
Yep,
space,
yep,
because we've already been given been given a redeemed heart in
yep,
order to continue be fruitful, multiply, seek adventure, take risks,
yep,
innovate. Like that's already sort of hardwired into our new hearts because it's a redeemed heart, because it's a thoroughly human in Christ way to do things. I think also on the history thing, and I have these thoughts. This is kind of the 1998 Nobel Prize winner for economics. The quote he had about the internet is going to be as relevant as the fax machine in 2005.
yep,
I just want everybody to sit on that for just 1 second, because have we abdicated a sense of leadership, courageous leadership? Have we
yep,
abdicated that to the experts?
yep,
Because expertise and leadership are two very different things. And I'll prove it
yep,
this way. Fauci was asked, and whatever you want to say about Fauci, whatever. But here's the point. Fauci was asked, like, have you thought about the economic implications of like lockdowns and all that? And he's like, that's not my job.
yeah,
Now, I appreciate him being honest. He's just
yep,
like, I don't think
yep,
about that. And so now the question is, okay, who's going to lead us
yep,
in this space, in this new space, right? In this completely new territory. So what that got me thinking, the 1998 quote, I got to thinking, Henry Ford there's a famous quote attributed to him. I don't know. It's just like, if you ask people what they need, they're going to say faster horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have this thing called felt need versus real need.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So the felt need is faster horse. The real need is we just need a faster way to get from A to B.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder, are we, and this is a bold thing, but it's kind of like, are we in the middle of a horse and buggy convention and the first automobile just hit the street?
Yep.
Are we at Blockbuster getting our 3 for $1 videos and Netflix just hit the street? Are we holding Blackberries and Palm IQs and the Apple iPhone just got invented? Are we maybe the chief, quartermaster for the scriptoriums in the 15th century, and we're in charge of 100 monks and all the services? And did the printing press just hit the world? So the question is, are we in the middle of this fiat financial establishment and Bitcoin just entered the world? I personally have put all my bet on that. Just for the record, not financial advice. I'm just saying, I have a high conviction. And here's another thing I want to say. Could we all be wrong about this? Of course we could all be wrong about this. I'm just simply saying we are asking really good questions. Regardless. You see what I mean?
100%.
And so the Bitcoiners, we've just gotten to this place by a process of elimination, right? I put value into the world. I receive the representation of that value in wages. Where can I stick those wages for my children, for my children's children? Process of elimination takes me to, I got one spot, that's Bitcoin. I got no other spot that I can, real estate stocks. Yeah, they're good mid thing. That's fine. But like, sure as heck ain't a savings account at a bank, right? Everybody knows this. So it's just, we get to that process of elimination where I've arrived at the conviction, like, I got to stick my value in Bitcoin. And this is another thing. I just want to say this, like, I think, a lot of people don't understand that the investment versus savings thing. Okay. Is Bitcoin a good savings technology? Yes. Will it be a good savings technology in 50 years? Yes. Simply because of its inability to be inflated, right? Now, some of us are early. Might we happen to be capturing a significant arbitrage over what we think to be the next 5 to 10 years between the dollar and Bitcoin? And could it be that we come out with a lot of wealth? It could be. Then the question goes, okay, how does God call us to steward that? And so you kind of got to play the whole thing out, and you got to pray through the whole thing, and you got to ask the Lord to guard your heart and ask the Lord to remind you of the inheritance that you have to come and all of these things. You have to run those in parallel. I'm going to be curious, and I'm going to say, Lord, you've promised that you're going to hold on to me, and I've got the trust in that. So,
And so again, we can definitely look at it from the standpoint of Bitcoiners themselves. How should they think? Right. And like, there obviously are specific challenges to us as people who have this, who have Bitcoin, and who, again, Lord willing, will have Bitcoin into the future. Again, the problem is the people who are not Bitcoiners want to focus on that question. And so it's like, okay, now again, if it's your pastor or, somebody,
they want to focus on which question?
They want to focus on the question of, they're acting like the only relevant question is, well, what is this doing to you? And like, what is this doing to the individual? And what we're saying is, yes, that is a fine question to ask. Like, yes, personal piety as it relates to how to steward resources is important.
Yes.
What we're saying though is, okay, we acknowledge that's important, and we're recognizing that we're trying to guard our own hearts, all this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, that is by no means the only factor. There's probably 10 other factors that you're not even thinking about. And the thing that I would say to people is, so the danger, right, is one of what is hypocrisy? The nature of hypocrisy is having one standard for other people and then another standard for yourself.
Right.
And so the thing that drives me sanctifiedly nuts is when people will say, have you considered that you could be wrong? That do you acknowledge that something could happen to Bitcoin and that you could be wrong, or that's, something along the lines, even if everything is fine with Bitcoin right now, that something could happen in the future that could result in it going kaplooey. And I would acknowledge, of course, Now,
That
then I would
assumes
turn around
safety, though. That assumes safety in the current system. That's
like,
where I go to
exactly.
that
So
question.
that's
Right.
one thing. The
That's
other
right.
thing that I would turn around and ask them is, have you reconciled with what it could mean if you're wrong?
Right.
And so that's where I just come back to over and over again. And again, I would say that these are not equal. These are not equal wrongs. Like, so what, if we're wrong, it's a technical problem. If they're wrong, you're denying history. You're denying, like, hey, all fiat currencies fail. Like, this is just something that happens. And so what are the consequences of fiat currencies doing exactly what they've done for as long as they've existed? The consequences are all of the money that you're sitting here holding in fiat currency is that it goes to zero. And so what does that do to your ability to church plant? What does that do to your ability to, we're not talking in 20 years, we're talking in 5 years, we're talking in
Right.
3 years.
That's right.
You're talking,
because remember,
yeah.
at the end of the day, it's still a savings technology.
Yep.
If we're in a cycle thing, that's fine. 4 years, hold it. I'm saying it's still just a good idea to save.
Yep.
I'll give you the 4 year time period. Like, okay, sit on it for 4. Let's see what the cycles do, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
I think another thing, Jordan, too, is, we are thinking everything belongs to the Lord. This is one of the responses that I got. One of the overwhelming responses I got to the overture is just like, why are we focusing on this? Why are we not just focusing on the gospel? And my simple reply there is, everything belongs to Jesus.
Yep.
The scriptures speak about money a ton,
Yep.
and we are called to be stewards, and we are in budget meetings all the time.
100%.
And there's a chronic anxiety in session meetings because of fiat currency. That's what it is. So let's just name the chronic anxiety that we can't trust what we might or might not have in 5 to 10 years. We can't trust it. We don't know what the inflation rate's going to be. And so I'm just saying, let's name the anxiety in the room and what stirs it first. And then let's talk about possible avenues of allocating towards something that could hold value better. I just want to start right there. And so to me, there's no dichotomy between the proclamation of the good news of the gospel
100%.
and every other facet of life. That is one aspect of the Reformed world and life view, where we take all of life. All of life, in a sense, is holy. All of life is to be brought before the Lord, and not only our gospel proclamation, but the avenues and the wisdom of how we structure that is to be thought through. And so that's where nothing's going to take the place of me getting up on Sunday morning like I will this Sunday and saying, hey, y'all, this is the good news of the gospel. But then I'm going to apply it to marriage. I'm going to apply it to how they work their finances. I'm going to apply it to, their work relationships. I'm going to apply it to all those things because the Bible does that, right?
Exactly.
So,
and you can't. The other thing, again, to this point is, again, it's one thing if somebody is saying, hey, why don't we just focus on the gospel? And they also are saying, hey, we're so committed to the immediate proclamation of the gospel that we're not even going to think about having retirement accounts. Okay.
Right.
One thing to say that would be a level of consistency. It's a level of inconsistency to say, why aren't we just caring about the gospel at the same time as you already have a giant pot of money that's designed to be, to rightly allow your pastors to have some sort of retirement. So like so my point is, what you're saying is not somehow inconsistent with what you're already doing. You're bringing up a specific investment or specific savings technology that is already in line with a principle that the presbytery has already agreed on, right? And
right. So we didn't even talk about the moral aspect of Bitcoin as a principle. Like, I mean, it's like, you're like, sound money is good.
Yes. And so I think one of the things that I just come down to is, as somebody who I've never formally studied logic, but I mean, all day long, I was a philosophy major, and all day long, I'm constantly just putting my own ideas, other people's, I'm just constantly putting them through the ringer. And then like what that along with that is just a sense of risk management. And so this idea of like, what if you're wrong? If you're wrong, like if we're wrong, if Bitcoin people are wrong, and you've allocated 10% to Bitcoin, then you've lost 10%. Okay. The reality is, if you've held like if you've held the S&P 500, it has 10% drops. We can identify them in the last 15 years. We can identify ones where it was significantly more than that. And so the problem is, what if we're right and you have no exposure to Bitcoin, then you're missing out, and fiat collapses. Then that's not good risk management. If you crunch the numbers on that, it's not going to, you've put yourself in the worst possible situation. And
Yeah,
so,
did it just come out? Was it a couple of weeks ago that gold has actually outperformed S&P in the last 20 years? I can't remember.
yeah, yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
crazy.
It is and it isn't. This is what I've been saying. Again, this is like Jim McAndrew. This is what I'm saying. This one's for you, man. Like, the gold people, they sound dumb. Like, they sound dumb, and they're wrong for years, quote unquote, wrong for years. If you're just talking about sheer performance, which Christians shouldn't do, but if you're even just looking at pure performance, just like Christians, we can look wrong and look dumb for a long period of time before we were revealed to be right in the end. Like, this is, so it's not about being proved right over a short period of time.
A little mini MINI eschatological
exactly
moment
it doesn't
there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
you can be
I hadn't
wrong.
even thought of that. Like,
you
as
can
far
look
as like,
wrong.
yeah, we're gonna look wrong to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then Jesus promises, no, I'll vindicate you. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Don't worry about, and I think another thing there that's really helpful to us is to go, we don't have to worry about being right.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about it. And I'm talking about the gospel, right? I'm talking about the gospel. We don't have to worry about being right. Our job is to do our job.
Yep. And that's a helpful lesson. Again, this is where these metaphors comparing Bitcoin and Christianity can help us going both ways, because there are people, and I mean, some of us on this call may have even been in this situation where you are so over the top talking about Bitcoin with certain people that, it can do more harm than good, or it can, prolong things, because the sheer overwhelming nature of the response and of the reality of what's going on can kind of distract, even though it's not justified. It can still distract from the reality and the truthfulness of what you're saying. And so,
I'll say too, I want to make it very clear that my heart is with the institutional level understanding and of Bitcoin. My day in and day out, I'm an evangelist. I love talking to people about Jesus.
Yep.
I'm gonna say this, and they'll be like, "Why not?" I still don't think half my church doesn't know I even do Bitcoin. Now it's going to come out because we're going to start our own Bitcoin Stewardship Reserve policy soon. But anyway, my point there is, like, my focus has been and will continue to be, as best I can, that institutional level curiosity, developing that curiosity with churches and presbyteries in our denomination. And because I do think on a macro level, it could free us up to make a larger impact as we, again, I've said this before, God is going to bring about his kingdom.
Yep.
It's not in the sense, I don't feel like some people say, where they say, like, I have to bring God's kingdom. I don't have to bring God's kingdom. I'm just saying the curiosity, the adventure, the eschatological promises of eternal relationship with the Lord, inheritance, frees us up to jump into these things with wisdom and humility. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm saying. So.
Yep. Yeah. And this is, I mean, the last thing I think we can say on this, or should say, and I'll give you the last word here in a second, would just be, there's a very similar relationship between the way that the Apostle Paul describes the ability of a believing wife to win her unbelieving husband to Jesus, like through her conduct, through her character. Like, your character can speak truth in reality in ways that your words can't necessarily. And so I would just encourage, if you're a Christian Bitcoiner out there, one of the most helpful things that you can do to add credibility to your Bitcoin profession and your Bitcoin conviction is to be an encouragement to your pastor, is to like love and serve the people in your church, is to love people around you well, your neighbors, your family, whatever it is. Because again, that can be something that can be a tipping point, a decision maker in whether or not people respect and are willing to give you a hearing, wrongly or rightly. That's a factor that will just necessarily come into play. So that's just an encouragement to us to to consider our manner of life, to quote the scriptures.
Yes, there's a Jesus way to do it. For some reason in God's counsel, Jesus didn't come until he came. When nobody gonna rush him,
Yep.
And so there's a pattern there for us to go, absolutely hold your conviction and
Yep.
bridle that with your character and the way in which you go about seeking to quote orange pill people, right?
Yep.
So.
Yep. Ben, appreciate you, brother. Grateful for you. Tell people where they can find you insofar as you want them to be able to find you.
Oh, I mean, I poke around on X a little bit. B Hailey 55 is my handle. I'm just pastor day in and day out. And I just want to say, Jordan, I really appreciate your hard work. Takes a ton of courage, has taken a ton of courage for you to step into developing something like Thank God for Bitcoin, and your conviction and your courage does not go unnoticed. And I have deeply appreciated the camaraderie, first of all, our brotherhood in Christ for sure, but also the shared interest in the love for the church, and all the hard work you do to try to help people understand it. This podcast takes a ton of work. So I just wanted to say that for sure. Thank you so much for having me, and I really hope it's been helpful. So
yeah, grateful for that, brother. Thank you so much. And again, this won't be the last time. We'll have you back. We need to do some more like roundtable stuff, because those are some of the best conversations you even have on the podcast. It's just like before or after during the week and stuff. So. Anyhow, we are grateful for all of you guys. Go follow Ben on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. Go follow him there. Go find us, like and subscribe on X, on Facebook, on YouTube. That helps other people find these resources. If you have questions, reach out to us. We're happy to do anything in our power to help. And we'll be back on Tuesday for another episode of the Thank God for Bitcoin podcast.
Thank you.